all before she finds out that the world isn't actually ending.
It's a great hobby.
Wiggum pervert, and that time where she invited Marge to become a throuple. But perhaps my all-time favourite Helen moment, again, the majority of you still voted for Helen being the worst. This is pretty damning, and I've got to be honest, I knew
To reward myself with a case of wine.
So therefore, she's not even confined to just being mean to Marge out of the group.
You're about as popular as Rugburn. All in favor of expelling Marge from the
Meaning behind it.
In every political debate, there's some imbecile who's going, think of the children, even when the children have nothing.
Ways.
From now on, I'll use my gossip for good instead of evil.
And as we all know, that promised overprotective father who threw Bart out of his house, and it was then him who defended his little girl when she was caught anymore. She's now antagonizing the kids. Whatever happened to think of the children? But yeah, in season 29, now, in most of Helen's appearances, it's usually Maud who takes charge and gets the most lines, but that all changed in... Thankfully, Roswell eventually reached a deal with Fox and returned to the show in 2002. Marge is kind enough to invite Helen and a few other ladies over, and Helen still has a few cutting comments. I've functional marriage, as well as their issues with intimacy.
Is this dominating enough for you, sweetheart?
Do it, sweetie! Save our troubled marriage!
Which, let's face it, is very ironic because in a huge group there seems to be one in particular that fans simply can't stand. A character that is almost universal in the eyes. Anyway, despite this episode being about the Lovejoy family, Helen doesn't actually play too much of a
toy train. I'm with you.
Even now, in recent episodes, like in season 33, Helen is for how great she is. And speaking of Roswell, let's briefly discuss her other character, Maud Flanders. She's always asking for others to
think of the children.
Oh well, yeah, she doesn't even think about outlandish characters in Springfield. And although I've never really minded Helen, I can see why she may rub fans up the wrong.
Very, manly? I don't know.
Ultimately, Helen Lovejoy perfectly serves her Kima and put on trial. Helen Lovejoy is then called in as a witness, and as the Reverend's life, she's privy to potential medical history. Very shrewd, Helen. Very shrewd. Later on, when Marge is caught shoplifting at the
Frankly, a lot of things aren't intended for children or have children have no bearing on.
Which kind of sums Helen up to a T. She
have.
Thankfully, we have seen Marge get some payback, like when she slapped her in season 28. Goes outside and knocks out Flanders. Then she kisses Mo before destroying her husband's train set. Her clothing also says a lot about her, in that she may not be this cartoonish villain, but she is. She learns all the juicy details about her friends' kids' grades, and even the latest gossip about everyone's conflict.
Of the children!
And come on, I bet that whenever you think of Helen, you instantly hear this line. Her own. All in all, she's a total hypocrite. And speaking of which, it's not until season 7's Much and Sideshow Bob, but the difference between them and Helen is that fans don't dislike them. But Helen's character design also made it very obvious as to who she is, because her face is long, and her character's conservative clothing also matches her developing conservative views, which we'll then see more of in. But don't get used to it, because there aren't many moments like this with Helen. And even if she isn't the most sympathetic, both are mums of troublemakers, but while Marge tries to teach her kids life lessons, Helen doesn't seem to do the same. Counselling retreats, which ironically later episodes would pick apart by putting a bigger focus on their own dysfunction. And again, later on when she discovers Marge has redesigned a brothel, you can bet your life that Helen in Marge's stories. Let's be honest, she's a great antagonist for Marge because she's like her in a lot of ways.
Marge behind her back.
And in season 22, she pressures Marge into buying a ridiculously expensive bag. And in the twisted world of Marge Simpson, she's a member of the Springfield Investorettes who push Marge,
which practical as they may be, are evil.
And when Marge steps back, Helen steps up. And the response was overwhelming with over 700 comments. And the names that came up the most were Helen Lovejoy. She's the judgmental mother in the playground, the mean girl that never grew up, the women that exist very much in our world, feel repetitive, and make her less endearing compared to other characters on the show, therefore leading to frustration. Marge we trust. When Marge starts volunteering at the church and listening to people's problems, it gets to the point where Marge is a very doting mother. So let's add bad mother to her already long list of bad quality Reverend Lovejoy's timeline. I have been thinking about bringing that series back, so let me know in the comments if you'd be interested. It's also worth noting that in this same season, we find out that she and Reverend Lovejoy run their own marriage of the show Life in the Fast Lane. Here she catches Marge on a date with Jacques, and from the very start we're shown
That's what you acted like before the medicine.
And although Helen is judgmental towards Marge, at least, and again, The Simpsons took that stereotype and perfectly fitted her into Springfield, and more specifically, even her husband. There's not really a warm or kind look to her. In fact, she almost looks like an alien.
Of the children!
Now, I came to this result after asking you guys who your most disliked character was. Helen is far more confrontational and stubborn. It's therefore these differences that highlight Marge's civility, and of everyone in the show, she's the one who's the most realistic. I'm sure we all know someone like Helen Lovejoy, so probably because getting Meryl Streep in was, super expensive, she does make a few more appearances.
Better lemonade at Ralph Wiggum's stand, and he stirs it with his finger.
Nights with Dr. Hibbert and Miss Hoover. And at first I thought this was a really random group pairing.
Well, those bags are pretty pricey.
All in all, Helen just seems to absolutely relish in making it very sensitive information. And of course, she spills all the tea.
Marge's husband doesn't earn much.
And emotional maturity. And sure, there are plenty of antagonistic characters in The Simpsons, like Mr. Burns, Artie Ziff, Sherry and Terry, and Agnes Skinner. So I then took those names and created a poll, and narrow with very pointed and sharp features that only complement the harshness of her character. She's just very uptight. I mean, she's literally tied up with a neat little bow. This, I think, was another intentional mums.
Why are you so bitter, Helen? Is it because your husband would rather play with his
choice when creating her character, especially when she stood opposite Marge, who is bare-shouldered and wearing a strapless dress. But as soon as she gets out of earshot, Helen immediately bitches about her.
What do we do now?
Let's talk about
doesn't have the same rounded features as everyone else, with the soft nose and almost doe eyes like, well,
maybe we shouldn't have sent Homer Simpson into that den of sin.
My husband's a good man.
I think it's a coincidence that sharper angles and features have been used to bring villains or more antagonistic characters to life for decades. According to Simpsons Wiki, there are over 9,000 Simpsons characters, and even if you cut out all the guests, cranking up her worst tendencies to 11. In season 21, she joins Marge in protesting him, and with more than 80,000 votes cast, Helen Lovejoy took the lead with a staggering 66% decades. So does her character design play into the large role in how we view her? It does make you think. I mean, what do any of them really have in common? But then it hit me, Helen's got the inside scoop on everything here. Like in season 33, where we find out that Helen has her daughter heavily medicated. Just against violence in cartoons, and is also shown to be very chummy with Maude, which I will touch on. But that's a theory for another time. I also don't people stop going to Reverend Lovejoy for guidance and start going to the Listen Lady instead. And so with Timothy in season 11's Alone Again Naturally Diddly, when there was a contract dispute between Fox and Maggie Roswell, Marge can act as a moral authority, but is also open to change during debates and reconsider her stance, while help herself throwing shade.
Well, maybe you can fool the Hibberts, but to me, this is a work of a
genius.
Marge Simpson over there, having brunch with a man who isn't her husband? And I just had to come over and say hello.
As a somewhat uninvolved or negligent parent, which could reason why Jessica has such poor behaviour. Came recently in season 36's Women in Shorts, which is basically a spiritual sequel to 22 short films about and perhaps she acts out not to get her father's attention, but rather her uninterested mother's.
Besterettes.
It was this particular episode that really made me think of Helen as more of a man. And in one of my all-time favourite Marge moments ever, she roasts Helen in season 30's Working. Let's see if we can find at least some redeeming features. Helen Lovejoy first appears in the 9th episode of Pooh About Nothing that she says this iconic line. You think Helen Lovejoy was unpopular, but I didn't realise that she was this disliked. So, what's the deal? What exactly is the purpose in the show? She's written to be as unlikable as possible, and the writers have certainly succeeded in that. Qualities. Unlike other characters, there's nothing really about her that makes you root for her. And on top of that,
Go back to the cowboy thing and wait in the car.
and if you want to know a bit more about their kinky love life, maybe I'll cover that in. She even rewarded herself with a box of wine when she made them both miserable.
My work is done. Now
Others miserable, even stirring the pot between Bart and Lisa in The Fabulous Faker Boy. Feeling lost without his flock, Helen is concerned for her depressed husband and calls on Marge for advice. This is perhaps the only time where Helen is sympathetic, and her concern for her husband is actually really sweet in her next speaking role in season 2's Itchy and Scratchy and Marge. Here she readily joins the protest, someone who thrives on gossip and makes snide remarks. She's self-centered and has a huge superior. And when Marge sets out to prove them all wrong by becoming a professional interior decorator, Helen still can't. Personally, I don't dislike Helen. She's had too many funny moments. Like, think of the children calling us and one-timers, you're still left with at least 100 or so recurring characters. And out of this entire Lovejoy, who may seem like a little angel, but is really the devil in disguise. I'm telling you, it's
to do with the debate. And it often derails the debate because you have to think of the children and really, quite frankly,
still giving Marge a hard time.
It must be so easy to shop when anything's good enough for your family.
And Helen's next biggest role came in season 4's Marge in Chains, where we find out that she has weekly poker in Springfield. Here she mistakenly believes that the world is going to end and she immediately loses her inhibitions. And she doesn't stop there, going on to criticize Marge's interior decorating. And sent to jail, Springfield starts falling apart, but when she's released, Helen makes a promise to mend her gossipy. She doesn't care about the kids, she just wants to be outraged for the sake of being outraged. Which kind of has the same later. But even after getting all of the violence removed from Itchy and Scratchy, she and Maud still unhappy, soon to change her mind after hearing this very catchy song.
Yes, we keep the in Springfield.
Turning their wrath against Michelangelo's David.
It's filth. It graphically portrays parts of the human body.
And garbage mouth, bad breath, neutralizing suppositories.
Now, authority complex. As such, she's very easy to get under your skin, unlike, you know, the more outlandish just wants to be involved, even if it is saying something that has no bearing on anything that is going on.
Have many wonderful talents, but your sense of style is,
One of them?
I'm afraid not.
But that wasn't enough, because God knows I love making a poll, so I made another one with other names and a feeling. It seems like Jessica is a total daddy's girl. Perhaps it's this family dynamic that hints that Helen is. But at least Marge gets her revenge by sneaking in some very embarrassing items into her cart. Exactly what kind of person she is. A nosy, gossiping busybody.
Why, isn't that...
So, where did it come from? Well, this is Bill Oakley in a DVD commentary for this episode explaining the character. At least she can be really funny at times, like when she screams this in season 8. I think the real reason why Helen stands out in terms of fans' hatred is that she has no real redeeming effect in season 8's Bart After Dark, where Helen joins the crusade to take down a burlesque house, only versely disliked, Helen Lovejoy.
Oh, won't somebody please think...
Mean girl than purely just a judgmental mother. However, we see a far more human side to her, demanding that the curator gets the hell out of town.
We want you to get your big Italian butt out of here.
Let's face it, may be too busy with her own gossip to take any notice of her. And while Jessica doesn't speak much after this episode, it doesn't last too long. In season 6's Bart's Girlfriend, we finally get to meet her daughter. Jess quit, and as a result, Maud was killed off.
And the family's a mess, and quite frankly, I think she,
After Marge is there to pass judgment again.
Marge, I never thought someone could sink this town lower, but you...
What do so many people have against this woman? Let's look through her history on the show and find out. And along the way...
Was that a woman's voice? Send her in.
But anyway, bringing it back...
Oh boy, that sounded bad.
Maggie Roswell definitely doesn't get enough credit, but with Maud's character permanently in the ground, Helen stepped up and became even more antagonistic towards Marge. Because while she is supposed to be this comedic character, I can understand how her one-dimensional betrayal can...
Lovejoy, you always have to stir the pot.
Unlike you when you make your lumpy clam chowder.
...a role here. In fact, she doesn't talk to her daughter once. Instead, it's the Reverend who steps forward as the